Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, where we dive deep into the minds shaping our cultural landscape. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we're joined by a true renaissance man of the digital age, Mike Oppenheim. Mike is the mind behind You Are Here on Substack, where he spins philosophy, humor, and life's big questions into content that's both thought-provoking and accessible. We'll be talking about how philosophy infiltrates our daily lives, exploring the profound thought through the lens of the everyday, and even touching on life's ultimate mystery, death, with Mike's unique Coffin Talk series. So, whether you're a thinker, a dreamer, or just someone looking for a fresh perspective, buckle up as we navigate the casual with Mike Oppenheim. Let's get started. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's really good to be here, and thank you for having me on. And I'm excited because I see like the headlines and the names for shows, and then I do actually listen to them and get a feel for it. But just your headline, just the title, Just a Dude, it really spoke to me because I'm from the Bay Area of California, and we use the word dude interchangeably. We use it for both genders. We're all genders. We don't care.
Yep.
Everyone's a dude. So it's just like put me at ease. It made me feel comfortable.
Awesome. Excellent. Yeah, Mike, the whole premise behind the show and the reason I started it was, we see a lot of podcasts with big names. I think of Joe Rogan or like Theo Vaughn, people like that are really popping out. But I'm like, is there a podcast out there just like for normal dudes and dudettes? What are we doing for regular people? It's nice listening to celebrities and things like that. And by all means, hey, if there's a celebrity listening, I think either one of us wouldn't mind having them on the show that we have. But the thing is I wanted to get things out there, get different perspectives, and just get everybody the opportunity to hear things from normal people that we would meet any day, So thanks for coming on the show. And Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and how you got into writing and podcasting.
Yeah, sure. So I guess since I already mentioned I'm from the Bay Area, I was born in New York and I lived shortly in Florida as a kid. But I mean, by the time I was 4, I was in the town next to Berkeley in the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents were both transcendental meditating hippies, and they were not anti-religious, but they were not religious. So my background was like kind of unique because I grew up in like a very normal, like Protestant kind of like community, but I was like this weird kid with like parents who meditated. And so I, at least that's the story I tell myself, because you know how it is as you get older, you're just kind of like, I'm making up my childhood as I go. Like my brother is 2 years older than me, and he's like, I don't remember that way. Like he's like, that did happen, but that's not at all. But my version of my childhood is very pleasant. I had great, loving parents, and I think the reason I became a writer is just my personality. But I do know my parents were like really big on reading to me as a kid, and I have children now, and there is a lot of evidence that if you read to them early, they enjoy books and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I definitely did not become an academic like early on in life. I just liked hanging out and being a dude, and played like the normal sports. But when I got into college, I got really into like learning, and especially philosophy. And I was just kind of blown away by the college approach to like, oh, you're learning so you can think better, not like you're learning to pass a test, take an SAT,
right.
And so that's when education became like fun to me. So I did not like school at all as a kid. I wanted to drop out of high school. And that's just weird to me because I write novels and I write essays, and I'm like very like into what school is supposed to teach you. But I hate authority. I don't like disrespect police officers and authority, but I don't like the feeling and the vibe of authority speaking to me. So yeah. So
you like that real freedom feeling of being oneself, true self, right? Having true freedom. And yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And I think, it's a weird time to live in, especially in America right now, because I think
absolutely
55 eclectic groups are all using the word freedom differently, and everyone's like,
yeah.
But I think the bottom line is I think all of us just want to be treated with like dignity, and that is a sense of freedom. So I do think there's like an interesting thing going on with like people arguing, but that's kind of for the same thing, which is to be left alone, but also to be allowed to be out as yourself. So I feel that vibe, especially as like a writer, and kind of like, I'm not a contrarian by nature, but I find myself taking contrarian views a lot. Like I definitely believe none of us are ever going to know how Earth works. So we should really stop arguing like moral imperatives. And we should instead look at like, not to get too philosophical, but like, utilitarianism, like how are the most people going to benefit and enjoy existence on Earth, So.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, it's definitely a different time, especially when we look at our country with the different administration coming in. And Mike, I'll be honest with you, I tend to lean to the right in my thinking a little bit. But that one thing that you said that I think that we really need, and this is getting a little philosophical too, is that regardless of what our viewpoints are, we're all human beings, right? And I don't know when we came from I remember growing up as a kid that everybody had different opinions, but regardless of what opinion they had, we all could still get together. And nowadays, it just seems like regardless of what your opinion is, if you're not with me, you're against me. And I think that's something that I would love to see change. You know?
It's weird that you feel compelled to say I lean to the right, and you even like feel like you're saying it almost apologetically, and that to me is like BS, because even though I lean a little to the left, I could say that publicly with more like freedom, and that's BS, because I grew up in the same world, and I don't like that. I don't think it's good that one side would feel more comfortable publicly talking, and yet behind closed doors, I much more commonly hear the like slightly to the right voice. So it's like interesting too, because I'm seeing a duplicity just in like peer groups, but it's not duplicity for me. It's not like my friends are trying to like deceive me. It's that people are literally scared to have a public view right now.
Well, you know, and I think that's a good point, because I think there is that fear to really say what you're thinking, because there's been so much backlash and so much of that, like I was talking, where if you're not for me, you're against me. So we can't have enlightened, intelligent conversations and even come to the agreement to disagree. You know?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. I think that's why a lot of people don't feel like they can speak out on what they have, you know, what their views are or what their viewports are, because we're either afraid of offending someone, or we're afraid of how we're going to be looked at. But yeah, my whole thing in that is, regardless of what you look like, I don't mind being your friend. I love hearing people of different opinions, different backgrounds, because I believe that's what made the United States a great country. And I think that's something we should get back to.
Yeah. I miss like just talking and meeting people. Like it was so, I mean, this is not the just two old dudes podcast, but I would say like it used to just be normal to talk. And I do actually blame like cell phones a lot for this too, just because
Oh my gosh.
You feel like a creep if you're not just looking at your phone. Last night I went to dinner with my wife. It's our anniversary, and like she went to go to the bathroom. Thank you. Thanks. 5 years. I'm pretty impressed.
Nice.
So like she goes to the bathroom, and I vowed not to pull out my phone, but I never thought I would feel the pressure I felt, which is I was worried I looked weird just looking out at the restaurant. Yeah. So it was like a different fear. It wasn't like I'm afraid of being bored. It was like, oh, now it feels weird to just like, am I allowed to sit at a Starbucks and just sip coffee and look at the Starbucks? Because that was normal.
It was, yeah. Back in the day, we used to do people watching all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we didn't have the phones and the constant communication that we have now. And so, I mean, that definitely wasn't a weird thing. I used to love to go, like when I was younger, you know, as a teen, we'd go to the mall. That was our big thing, which, you know, here, I'm from Ohio. So here in Ohio, I mean, I think the closest mall is probably like an hour away, because they're all shutting down. But I remember we used to go, and then you'd watch people. There'd be different people, different backgrounds. It was just amazing to watch all the different people. But now if you were to do that, they'd be like, hey, you're kind of creepy. Why are you watching everybody?
Yeah.
But yeah, so you got into writing and you got your podcast. And so how did you, you know, in the philosophical part, I saw that you have, was a Master of Fine Arts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I went to the University of Pittsburgh, so next to Ohio.
Yeah,
and I graduated in like 4 years, and I had a literature and a film degree, and I was really into film growing up. So I would make movies, and I made a professional amateur movie when I was 18. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I would not show it to anyone. I would not put it on the internet, but it still, to me, was like a sign that I at least had my S together to the point where I knew how to write a script, block it out, hire actors, film it, produce it, edit it, and make it. And we put it in a local film festival that was for minors. So again, there's no bragging going on, no flexing. I'm just actually telling my life story.
No, I love that.
But it was a big deal to me. You know, it was a big deal to like show a movie. My hero at the time was Kevin Smith. I mean, just worshipped the movie Clerks and Mallrats. Like those were like my. So it was, to say it is homage to Clerks and Mallrats is like, you know, it's not plagiarism, but snarky dialogue.
Definitely some inspiration. Yep. Yeah.
So I loved film, and then in college I had to take these literature courses, because that's kind of how like the film program worked. You had to take like other. And I just realized, like, oh, books are super fun when you're not reading them for like a teacher with like a cookie cutter test, you know, like we would just have these class discussions. Like we'd read a book, and I could like talk about how the book reminded me of real life, and that was a class. And I know some people actually have strong opinions against this, like, what a waste of money. Well, that's fine. Like, yes, a literature degree does not get you a scalpel in your hand in medical school, but it gave me analytical skills. A lot of people who are lawyers have undergrad lit, and so I just fell in love with every part of like storytelling. And then I didn't see it coming, but I was always driven by music. So I was playing in bands, and after college I was in a band, and I thought we were going to like go straight to the top. I had a huge ego about it, which is a necessary component. Like, you have to have that. But unfortunately, I didn't have an ego. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, just to draw off of that, is that, it helps you when you have that mindset. You call it an ego, but it's actually a positive mindset of, yes, we're going to make it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that
no
helps.
One
would. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. Like, I always think about the mission to the moon. Like, it's the most arrogant thing ever, and yet, well, I mean, unless Kubrick filmed it, they did it.
Yeah,
It's like,
right. Exactly.
So I was in a band, and my dreams of making it in a band were killed not by what I would have expected. It wasn't that we were told we sucked or we couldn't get gigs. It was the opposite. We were getting gigs, and I hated performing. It wasn't even nervousness. I just don't like staying up late, and I don't like staring at people and having them stare at me. Like, I don't get an ego kick off that. I get an ego kick off of compliments later. Like, that's what I learned. So I was like, that's what writing is. Writing is like compliments later. Like, here's something, read it whenever you want. I don't care. Like, don't stay awake late. I was going to say, it's funny that you say that about learning to, getting your inspiration for reading later on in life, because I was kind of like you in high school, where I hate when a teacher, an English teacher, assigned a book. I was like, I do not want to read this thing. I mean, it could have been the most interesting thing in the world, but like you said, no, you're assigning it to me, so therefore I don't want to do it. And I think that comes back to that thought of having people lord over you, and or authority, right? Authority's telling you to do it, so I don't want to do it. And then I learned later in life too. So I started college, at the college age, but then I went into law enforcement, and I did that for years. But then I got laid off, so I went back, finished my degree, and now I have several degrees. But it was the same way as you. As an adult, I think I appreciated the education more than when I was younger. And I mean, obviously, when I first went to college, I was an adult as well. But I think as I got older and started appreciating things more, I enjoy reading more. And, it just opens up a whole new world for you if you can get that enjoyment and not feel like it's a task. Yeah. It's funny because I feel the same way. I call myself a child when I was 20 now. Obviously, when I was 20, I called myself an adult. But like looking back, it's interesting. And I also wonder often if that's generational or like time related, because I think, in the 1940s, I bet 20-year-olds were like much older than you and I were at our 20,
Exactly. 20-year-olds were the 40-year-olds at the time.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like I would never call to their face or even on the internet a 21-year-old a child, but I would say your perspective is so driven still from a youth angle point that it's hard to explain even to myself.
Yeah, it is. And, you think you know everything, 18, 19, 20, 21, and then you hit 30 and you're like, oh, man, I don't even know anything.
Yeah. And that's also that famous, I think it was Winston Churchill, if you're young and you're not a liberal, you have no heart. And if you're old and you're not a conservative, you have no brain. Like, I mean, I hate to admit it, but, and Shane Gillis has that famous bit about he's turning purple. And I mean, it's just like, it's funny because even my suit, because remember, I'm from Berkeley, so I know some like liberals, like,
I'm sure.
Even they have shifted over age. Like, I mean, it's funny. Like, we're all in our early 40s now, and it's just funny to watch. Like, even like he's like, well, I mean, that is a little extreme to want that. And I'm like, yeah, okay,
exactly. It's funny how we might have different perspectives when we're younger, and I was exactly the same way with you. And how I say now I tend to lean to the right. When I was younger, I tended to lean to the left. So, as we get older and we have different experiences, I think that shapes what our, political views and really just our outline view is, as far as how we interact with things. But so how did this, your background get you to the, the inception of You Are Here? And what does that mean?
Yeah, for sure. So You Are Here is kind of my joke, like callback to one of my favorite people ever, which is Ram Dass. And Ram Dass like changed the world, so to speak, with his book Be Here Now. So his advice to everyone was to be here now. And then I am writing a joke kind of column called You Are Here. So like, be here now, you are here. So as you read it, you're here, and you're just like understanding who you are in relation to me. And so there's no goal to the column. It's like a syndication thing I started in 2006, and I have not missed a single week, I think, since 2012.
Wow,
I
that's
never
impressive.
take vacations. Yeah, I just it's like this thing I do, and I just always, it's kind of like the band thing. I believe the one thing I learned, I'm jumping all over the place, but this is important
No,
because
that's fine.
you're a podcaster, I'm a
Yep.
podcaster, and there's people who are into the internet. I used to run restaurants. That was like my side job while I was playing in bands and going to writing school and all that. And the one thing I learned, because I worked in 3 different restaurants and one failed and one immensely succeeded and one just broke even the whole time, is the number one thing you want to do is be consistent. You want to never close early, open weird hours. You don't want to ever like have a sign up on your door that says, sorry, closed for an emergency. Like whatever you do, make your podcast come out at the same hour on the same week of the same, and everything, and just be consistent. So I follow that approach with the writing one. And the reason I do it is 3 years into it, I was kind of like taking time off. I had a previous marriage. So I have a son from a previous marriage, and then I have 2 children with my good marriage. And in the phase where I had my first kid and I was in that first marriage, I would like take a week off here and there with the normal excuse most parents have, which is like, who cares? And
I don't have any time. I got
Yeah. And I just lost subscribers. I lost it was like amazing. The only time I lost more subscribers was that horrible time in 2016 where I said, maybe we should give this Trump guy a chance. So those are the 2 times.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Especially coming from California, I'm sure it's a little bit more liberal in that state than we are here in Ohio. As you can see the light. But what the funny thing is that myself, I live right in the heart of like one of the most Democrat-led cities, which is Akron, Ohio. Yeah, and I'm not in Akron. I'm right around the suburbs. But it's so funny because my views are not typically the views of people around me. But if I go into the country, we get similar views.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But yeah, it is funny just to see how things have changed, and the different locations we live in, how you can have different views and philosophy, which kind of leads to our topic of your philosophy and content creation.
Yeah.
So how do you go about this? Because you are here, right, and you write on that weekly, and you said you hardly missed any of it.
Yeah.
How has your journey evolved with that?
Yeah. So I started the writing thing. So there's been 3 titles for it. In 2006, it Sucks to Be You. And that was like,
I like that one.
Yeah. That was my mid to late 20s phase of life where I was very into like snark and humor, and also just like making fun of like, I was like the worst dater ever. And I don't mean like I dated all the wrong people. I mean, I like dated no one. Like I had tragically low self-esteem most of my life up until like my mid 30s. Now I just have like normally tragic low self-esteem like the rest of us. So,
yeah, like the rest of us. Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm proud to like but anyway, so I would just like kind of write about what it was like to like be, and this is before online dating and stuff. So it was kind of, it wasn't about like just dating, but it was like my observations. I mean, I lived in different locations, so it'd be a lot of like I would do road trips and write about that and stuff. So anyway, that evolved into what used to be called the casual casuist, and that's a casual connection to causality. So like what a famous like joke is if you look down at the sidewalks and they're getting wetter and wetter, you could think sidewalks cause rain, but that's really stupid. So that was kind of the point of it, is like I would intentionally start with like a bad premise and try to like prove it, and then kind of circle all the way back to the beginning, and I'd be like, oh, well, I guess that ironically doesn't make sense, So it was kind of that.
Yes.
And then I moved it to You Are Here when I really started like my professional side of all this, meaning I went to school, I got an MFA, I wrote novels, I was published, but writing novels and getting published like sounds really glorious, but it's like you have to market a lot, you have to do a lot of PR, you have to like go and try to sell your book, and I was terrible at that and still am. So one day I figured out that I could just sell things through the internet and it would be a lot easier for me. So now I run a Substack, which is mikeyop.com, and if you go to it, you sign up for a subscription service, and then I have fiction that I post, I have nonfiction and the podcast, and then you were referring to one of my bonus podcasts, which is like more like me getting personal. And so that's been like a really fun model. And so You Are Here is the name of like that whole thing, because that's like just what I am. And then we started off, we were talking about like celebrities, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as I get older.
Mm-hmm.
The word celebrity comes from like to celebrate, right? And these are people we celebrate. And you were talking about how we're just dudes and we want to hear from dudes. But I don't think a lot of people like celebrities. I think a lot of people like people who are becoming celebrities. And then there's like this awkward. Like you mentioned Joe Rogan. I was really
Mm-hmm.
into Joe Rogan from 2008 until recently, and now I'm really not into him, and it's not his fault. He just got so big
So
that it's not
popular
as
and so
fun
big.
to
Yep.
listen to. Yeah, like now he's like the majority opinion, and people are like listening to him and copying him. So again, I'm not an anti Joe Rogan at all. And
Sure.
like grew up on Joe Rogan. Like he's like such an influence for me
Yep.
for like 10 years of my life. And I went through a divorce and I would listen to him, and like he's very positive. Like he would never say like be mean to your ex and like do, you know, he's like the opposite. He's like
Exactly.
care about yourself, love everyone. He's such a like he has such a bad reputation right now, but he's a total hippie actually.
Yeah,
He's
he is. I mean, really, he is. And the thing is that I think a lot of it is because when he had President Trump on the show
yeah,
or
exactly.
JD Vance, and he invited the other side, but for whatever reason, I know we've probably heard different things that where Kamala Harris would and wouldn't go on, but I would actually love to see that interview because I think that was probably one of her biggest mistakes in her election was not going on the show because I just genuinely, I'd probably already made up my mind, but I didn't know much about her. And I was like, this is a great opportunity for her to just go and talk because I figured like his platform would definitely be one of those platforms where he could have probably left politics completely out of it. And they still could have had a show just for us to get to learn more about her. And I think that's one of the things that, that's probably going to come up as one of her biggest mistakes. And even for us, we didn't know enough about her, I think. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're absolutely right with Joe Rogan. Sorry, getting back around is,
No. I
you're
like
right.
what you said.
We do.
Yeah.
We do go to, celebrities. And I think you're right. It's not necessarily the celebrities we like. I think it's the rags to riches story and journey that we like.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where I feel I am right now. I don't know about the richest part, but I'm past rags. And I believe in myself. I just interviewed someone on my podcast. They were 75. And I said, what advice do you have for 50-year-olds? Because I'm 43. So I want to plan ahead.
Oh my gosh,
like,
we're the same age.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I'm like, don't give me advice for me now. Give me advice like that you would give me in 10 years. And then I'll start planning now to be there.
Exactly.
And he said, your 40s is when you have confidence and people want to invest in you. He said, as you get older, less and less people want to invest in you because, like it or not, the American culture ages you and outs you. And that's just, he actually said it like not with bitterness, but it made me angry. Like I was like, yeah, I've noticed that a long time coming. And it's ridiculous. Like making a woman feel bad when she turns 30 is like the meanest thing I ever saw in my whole,
that's
it was
crazy
so
to me.
mean. Like, yeah. And like,
age is just a number, literally. And,
yeah,
I think we're aging better than our parents probably did. And,
definitely,
definitely probably because we know a little bit more. And then hopefully our kids, well, in my case, I don't have kids, but your kids will age better than we did. You know, that's the whole idea. But yeah, I mean, I look at some folks that, that are my parents' age, and I'm just like, wow, these folks look really old. But we're kids. When I remember being a kid and when my parents were in their 40s, I was like, oh my God, they're old. This is like they're biting. Now they're in their 60s. I'm in my 40s. And I'm like, 60s doesn't seem that old to me now, like it did when really 40s doesn't. When I was a kid.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, I liked his advice because it really did get me fueled up. He said, and I noticed it. I'm sure you've noticed this. I just feel more confident because like, what are you going to do? You're going to like make fun of me. You're going to say I smell. Like that worked when I was 5.
Exactly.
That worked when I was 10. Like, okay, you're going to tell me that like I don't drink the right beer or I don't dress in the right clothes. No, I don't care. Like, look, I really don't care. I will wear a bland t-shirt with no logo and jeans every day of my life if I want to. I'm not in high school. I'm not trying to impress the kind of girl who would even want that. So even if I was single, it wouldn't affect me. I still understand now in my 40s, like I don't want to date the wrong person. I don't want to attract the wrong person. So all that, we're both feeling it. And I think, so that's the phase I'm in with my career is now I'm really writing with that confidence too. Like I just feel this different spirit and it is like spiritual almost. It's like this, just tell the truth. And that's why like, I like that you said your political view because you obviously care and you care about your viewpoints. So you should say that. And if you didn't care, don't say it. But that's the thing I'm noticing is like, everyone should feel comfortable saying what feels important to them, and everyone should be careful how they say that. Like, there's a twofold approach to this, and it's just strange to me because the last thing, and then I'm going to shut up because it just also applies, is people go on Instagram to watch people pretend that they're not filming themselves and self-obsessed. That's really weird. Like when we people watched, those people didn't want to be watched. and they didn't know you were watching, and that was the whole point of voyeurism. Now it's like performative.
Yeah, performative voyeurism, right?
Yeah.
We're just pretending that we're watching folks, and we're not even watching folks. It's just like they're reading a script and making a mini movie, and we're pretending like it's real life.
Yeah. So that's where
that is funny too, though, that I feel like with us both being the same age, we could probably both relate. When we grew up younger, I think we were actually beneficial to not have social media when we grew up, because I can't imagine what kids are going through these days.
No.
I see everything that's on social media. We get the keyboard warriors that'll go out there and say anything and everything because there's no repercussions. They don't have to see anybody. But I guarantee you that same person, if you put them in a room right across this table from you, they would not say what they said online.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I feel like it's given us a false sense of security to where, people say things without thinking because there are no repercussions. Like when you and I grew up, if I was going to say something bad about you, you probably would have known it, and we might have had words together. Right?
Yeah.
But now it's, there's no repercussions. So
I'll directly say it's a bad thing. I will actually go out and say that because I think actually, I'll even make this into an overt, I don't think a lot of those antagonistic people who are attacking the right wing on Twitter understood that they were attacking people who are going to take real action back against them. And I don't think they understand retaliation, whereas all people, liberal or conservative, in face-to-face conflict understand retaliation. It's a necessary component, and it does matter how big someone is, and it also matters how little or much compassion they have. So if you're going to attack people with little compassion and big egos who like bullying, that's a really dumb. And again, I come from the liberal enclave, so I'm trying to speak to my own people. You don't bully a bully. That's really stupid.
Exactly.
You stop a bully, but you collect help for that. And so that to me is a big problem, that the social media. And then the other thing is the eating disorder and suicide.
My goodness. Yes.
Crazy. So I don't think I'm going to let my kids, I'm going to let them be at friends' houses, and they're going to do whatever they do at their friends' houses, because that's what I did. But my house is going to be like my house was growing up. This is not the house where you hop on YouTube and,
exactly.
watch people getting killed in Ukraine.
Yeah. And I've seen that even with, some family members of mine where the screen is it's always in front of them. Always, whether it be they're watching YouTube or playing Minecraft or watching other videos. And I can't even imagine what our parents would have said to us if we were that age. They'd be like, get the hell out of the house, go outside, play, do something, But yeah, anyway, so this comes to philosophy. And so how do we, explore philosophy, and how can it be applied to our everyday life?
Yeah, I think, I had a friend absolutely ridiculing and talking philosophy the other day, and I was trying to figure out what their problem was. And then a different friend helped me understand that they were just kind of like a person who says, I hate foreign films. The association of philosophy is boring, sanctimonious, holier than thou. But real philosophy is actually the lowest of the low, dregs of the dregs. It's really just putting everything to a test. And so I think any person who's ideological needs to have a background in philosophy, because it's really easy to see through flimsy ideology, and that would help in this internet misinformation, disinformation, no information era. Because flat earthers, if they understood philosophy, would probably not really be flat earthers. But it's not, the argument to that isn't science said so, there's photos from the sky. That's not philosophy. Philosophy wouldn't just a point to start attacking someone at. It would just say, okay, let's start with your premise. Let's say Earth is flat. Okay, well, what are the necessary conditions? And I'm not going to go into this but so to me, philosophy is just really fun, because I don't care if biologically born male athletes can or cannot compete against women and call themselves women in women's sports. What I care about is, do we have a sound philosophical reason to ban it or to allow it? And shortcut answer, we have more sound philosophical answers to deny that than to support it. Because if you look at empirically, why do we have youthful sports? We have youth sports separated by biological sex so that the competition is more fair within each group. We've decided, blah, blah, blah. And so that's why I believe I can write, is that I could write an intelligent article about that. I would never write about that because I don't do mainstream topics like that, because there's no point.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. It's already covered so many different ways, and so that you're just like, what the heck? But yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that, is that you look at it philosophically. and not necessarily just say, well, I think. I mean, philosophy is thought, but, philosophically, you're right. Is there a reason for it? And I love the example that you use, because that's kind of what I go back to is when we're in our development phase, you want it to be, we're developing youth, whether it be a boy or a girl, and we're putting them in sports and we're developing them physically in that time. And in order for them to go on, if say a boy was constantly beating a girl in basketball because they weren't delineated, then maybe that girl would never play again. Or maybe those girls would never play again because they're always losing. And then they lose the love for the sport. They lose the love for activity. Then it comes to, weight gain and suicide, all those things that we already talked about, and that's the philosophy of it, especially at a young age. Now, maybe at an older age, you could have a different philosophy or discussion about that. But I loved what you said about it, with the kids.
And also, like, to be, just because I worry sometimes that people are going to, like, not clip us. Like, I'm not worried about us literally, but I worry that people don't really think this all the way through too, because I said society's philosophical imperative. So if you want to switch society's philosophical imperative, that's easy, and that actually doesn't require a lot of philosophy, and that's fine. But our biosocial philosophical imperative of every society on Earth right now is do what it takes to make sure infant mortality is at its lowest possible point, and people are having children, and the children are healthy enough to take over the labor. So, like, it does matter, like, this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's interesting to me because what you said really does matter. If we were going to have mono sports where everyone just plays together, then why even have the term women and men's? Like, there doesn't even need to be that. And that is, by the way, just to the internet, my solution to all the gender issues is just like when my two daughters are fighting over something and I take it away, since we're all fighting over gender, I would just take it away. I would say no one's allowed to have a gender. There's no such thing now. And then I would let people live in that world for as long as it takes before people would say, kind of see a point in having 1, 2, or 3 genders. And again, maybe there's 4, maybe there's 17. I don't know. I would just take them all away and then start seeing which ones we need. That's the philosophical approach I would take.
Yep. I like that. I could get behind that, because, and that was my thought process too, is if we're going to let men, or biological men, as we say, participate in sports that are supposed to be for biological women, then why do we even need to call it men's sports, women's sports? Just call it sports, right? Just call it basketball.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be men's basketball or women's basketball.
Yeah. And we're not saying this with vehemence or anger or even like a snarky tone. And that's what is so weird to me about the internet is, like, at some point we lost this, like you said, you and I said earlier, it's actually normal to disagree, figure out why and how you disagree. And then it's really normal to say, oh, well, we're not going to agree. And then you just both go home and drink coffee with your friends and go on. And you don't complain. You just,
Yeah. And if that, if you and I were to get together again and that topic comes up, we already know that we disagree on it. Unless something changes, we don't even have to talk about it again.
Yeah.
And we could still be friends another way. I still believe that even if, let's say that were a topic we disagreed on, and I know we don't, but if that was a topic we disagreed on, okay, that's a topic we disagree on, but I'm sure we're going to find much more that we agree on and have in common than what separates us.
Yeah.
And that's, that's kind of where my philosophical thing comes in, is even though we have these difference of opinions and we might feel like we're miles apart, I guarantee you we have so much more in common than what separates us.
Yeah. And that's the problem with these mini divisions, is like they distract us from the bigger ones, which do matter and are a problem, and like I would be the first person, I have been, to stand up with someone who's being attacked for any reason by any violent person. I don't care. So if
violence is definitely not the answer for sure. Definitely not.
So I'm mad that there's an association with opinions and like support or lack of. Also, I love when I meet someone like you who was younger. I'm saying was because I'm about to talk about your youth. When you were younger, you were more liberal than you are now, and you went into law enforcement, because I actually do believe that that is one of the biggest cures to authority problems, is to have like mixed age and ratios in. I'd like to see all the police officers be, well, there's 2 ways to look at it. 1, community policing, have them match the communities. But 2, I would actually prefer that, like, people in communities just see like a different race and gender and ethnicity cop in their neighborhood every day and get used to all of it, and they get used to each other. That to me would cure a lot. So it's always,
It's funny you say that, because I would love that as well. And one of my biggest things, and I'm no longer in law enforcement, but when I was a community policing officer, And I
Awesome.
loved getting out with the community. I knew everybody, even the people I arrested. If I arrested you today and you're out on jail tomorrow, I'd still talk to you because I realized, listen, we all make mistakes. We're all human beings. You might break the law. I've got a job to do. I got to put you in jail, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that I dislike you. I'm just doing a job. I'm just doing a job enforcing the laws made by, whoever. Doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it, which is probably why I'm not a cop anymore. But, there's a lot of things when I look back and I'm just like, that was the dumbest law in the world to ever have on the books. I still give a lot of credit to the men and women of law enforcement that go in and do the job. But one of the things that I saw, especially when I was part of the hiring process, because I worked for a smaller department, was the quality applicants. And I mean, trying to get people so I'll use Akron here, Akron is a predominantly Black city, with a lot of people, but the police are predominantly white. And with DEI and everything, they had the opportunities to hire people of the same color and from their communities. But the problem was they just weren't applying for it.
Yeah.
And that's what I would love to see. But I think there's been so many bad visions put on police officers today that's a stigma that's going to take some time to break. And until people step up and say, hey, I want to protect my community, and they represent that community themselves, then we're going to have this, I don't want to call it biased, but unbalanced, proportions of people that are doing the policing versus the people that are being policed. And that's one of the unfortunate things to me, is that people aren't just stepping up and saying, hey, I want to take care of my community.
Yeah, and I would add that, speaking of the meta subject we're on, which is philosophy, if you have an opinion about any law, you are philosophical, because all law is philosophy. Like, it's impossible to have a law that doesn't branch from an idea. And so it's interesting because that was always the biggest hang up for me about joining the Army or going into law enforcement. Both, the only problem about it for me was, what happens if I'm in a situation where I don't agree and I have to defend it? That question was answered many times when I became a teacher. You defend it. It actually makes sense once you're there, but it also is weird. I mean, I know soldiers and I know people who have participated in things they would not have by choice, but they understood that not following the order is also a real big problem. You
It's
can't
a real
just
big risk. Yeah.
Call the cops and they're like, I don't feel like coming to your house tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Could you
Yeah.
imagine if I showed up to your, you called me, I don't know, for some reason, I showed up and they're like, this seems like this will fix itself. That's fine. I'm going to leave, so. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a philosophy. And I mean, I think prohibition was one of the biggest things. We got rid of alcohol in this country, and the country went nuts,
Yeah.
and they were getting it anywhere, any way they could. So they saw, philosophically, hey, it's a great idea to remove alcohol. But the realization is not everybody wants us to remove it. So here it is back. That was one of the only, I think that was the only amendment that's one of the only amendments that's been repealed. But, it is funny how that philosophy changes.
I think they passed a different amendment to undo
they
it.
did.
Too. It was like,
yeah,
it's even weird because you can't repeal it. I don't know.
They had to,
but
they had to pass another amendment to say that amendment is no longer valid. So it is.
I hope I'm not wrong on this, because I hate when I spread apocryphal rumors, but I'm pretty sure too that women's suffrage was the right to get a vote in order to then make alcohol illegal, because alcohol was responsible for so much domestic violence.
Yeah.
So it's interesting too, because here we go back to this okay, am I for domestic violence? No, I'm as against it as you are. I mean,
absolutely.
Law enforcement, of all the people who hate domestic violence, I mean, you're
absolutely.
You see the worst side of it by far. And so it's interesting, because yet, ironically, getting rid of alcohol caused people to drink it even more, because when something's illegal in this culture in America,
oh my gosh,
that's
there's no better way to get somebody to do something than to tell them not to do it.
Yeah,
it's just. My wife and I were just talking about, oh my gosh, the straw. Oh my goodness, the straw thing, right? Oh, we're going paper straws. Nope. I'm going to hold on to this plastic one for the rest of my life. I don't care. I'm not using a paper one. What was even funnier though?
Yeah.
Was the paper? They took the paper straw and then they put a plastic cover over it to keep it sanitary. And I'm like, wait a second, what do we do here? This just makes no sense.
It's all. That's the one thing too. Speaking of performance, even. The law, the repealing of the law, everything about the straws is our performative culture in a nutshell. It's just
yeah, and I saw that there was an executive order, I think, that President Trump did the other day, repealing that, and I'm just like, part of me too was like, okay, I mean, that's fine, Yeah, but is this really the most important thing on our plate right now? I did an episode on Friday. It's funny. And this is why I say I lean towards the light, because or towards the right, I also like to call out our politicians when they don't stick to their word. And the one thing that stuck out to me about Trump was that after he got elected, within 24 hours of his inauguration, the Ukraine war would be over. And, so my thought as a responsible citizen is I got to call him out on that. And so I put that in my episode saying, hey, even though I might like some of his policies and might voice that, I'm also going to call him out because I believe that he needs to be held accountable for what he says. And if he says he's going to do something and doesn't do it, we need to bring that to light as well, because all of our politicians are held to a higher account and a higher accord than us, or they're supposed to be. I say supposed to be because I think we know there's probably more corruption in our government than anywhere else. We have to hold them accountable. And if we don't, they're definitely not going to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And so
I have like strong, uninteresting opinions about all this too. It's like interesting because, as you said, I'm just like, I have fatigue. I'm like tired of watching our culture not care, just watching it like you and I have seen like the lack of faith in institutions, the not only lack of faith, but the like, what's the point in even caring about having a lack of faith? Like it's just this tide. And meanwhile, all that happens is power blocks get stronger with that, because less people care, less people pay attention. So it'll be.
Yep. And the voices get smaller and smaller. Oh, yeah. Look at how much we've already lived through in 43 years. I mean, we had 9/11. We had the first war in Iraq. We had the second war in Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, just all this stuff we had, whether you like it or not, January 6th. I mean, just so much.
I'm with you.
I mean, you remember growing up. I don't know if you remember, but I remember when we didn't have a microwave,
Yeah.
That's how, and they were expensive back then. So we didn't, for the first few years of my life, I remember we didn't have a microwave. When we got one, I was like, oh, this thing's cool.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is weird how us as a society has really become less caring, I think, than even we were 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just like you said.
Yeah. And I don't know if I don't think it's any one thing. I'll put it that way. Like cell phone has something to do with it. Social media has something to do with it. I don't know which came first. TV getting so dumb because people are looking at phones, or TV getting so dumb that I started looking at my phone. Like, I don't know which one was first, but
because
both are true.
Yeah, there was some pretty dumb shows when we were growing up that could give a run for their money to the ones today. Let's discuss moral questions and the concept of unsound reasoning.
So
because I know you touch about that.
Yeah, and I think I talked about I'm doing three things. I'm releasing a lot of fiction, so I have like novels about I write crazy novels. I'll just say that they're fun and crazy, and they're very easy to read. But then my essays are what we've already been spending a lot of time talking about, and then my podcast is not really like traditional or like something I ever would have thought I would start. But I used to work in hospice, and I noticed that Americans in our culture avoid the topic of death, and that's a major problem. And so I was working in a hospice ward where people are designated to die, and I would meet people who were either unprepared to die themselves, or way more common, family members who had been pretending it wasn't happening and then are just like losing their mind, but it's way too late to tell the person. And so I've started this podcast called Coffin Talk, which is a metaphysical podcast. And by the way, you're insanely interesting, and I would love to have you on. So
absolutely, anytime. So, and for you too, I'm going to tell you, just in this little bit that we've been talking, you're welcome on the show anytime. I think we could have some good conversations.
Very cool.
So
Coffin Talk. So I won't let you answer this now. That's why I said it first, because I will. But we only ask one question for sure on the whole show, which is at some point when it's most relevant, I will ask the guest, what do you think happens when you die? And there's a lot of ways to answer that. But the point I'm trying to show people is some people have never thought of it, and other people are obsessed with it. But no matter what, no one has ever not thought about it. And everyone kind of is either secretly or overtly leading their lives with that plan in mind. So like, if you fear hell, that's really going to impact how you behave. And if you don't fear hell, that's going to really impact.
Absolutely.
And I've interviewed like a neuroscientist who believes in heaven. And I know a lot of like atheist scientists who would say like, that's impossible. But that person knows way more than you do about how human brains work. And they understand like words and things, that I don't. And yet they also believe in like guy enthroned on cloud with like St. Peter and all that. And I'm not making fun of these real guys. I'm just saying, and so it's just interesting because speaking of philosophy, to me, that's the ultimate philosophy that we're never going to prove. And that's also, all laws are designed to protect the sanctity of life. You know, like your
Yes.
life and your property is the second one, but really your life is the most important property of yours. And even that has a weird, you know, not capitalist, because that's the wrong word, but calling your body property would imply that you're not your body. It would imply that like maybe
Right.
there's a soul or something. And so that also is interesting to me, is like this body, mind. Is there a soul? Like, is there a triangle, or is it
so
just
like the body,
Yeah.
mind, spirit, bring the spirit
Yeah.
part of that in, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
the
my
soul.
podcast is kind of that. And it's also just,
And I was just going to say, I love that concept, Mike, because that is something that, you know, just like you said, we've either thought about it maybe a little bit, maybe haven't thought about it at all, or think about it a lot. And the one thing that's amazing about that topic is it's something that none of us can avoid.
yeah, totally.
I mean, we're all going to
Yeah.
die, so
Yeah.
we can't avoid it, whatever the cost. I mean, we could try as much as we want, and who knows, maybe with health, you know, advances in healthcare and technology, maybe we'll be able to live a little bit longer, but at some point, we're all going to die.
Yeah. And the most fascinating guests I've had, for me at least, are the near-death experience people, like the people who have, because one, they all have like the same things in them, and a lot of them aren't people who could have spoken to someone else and like memorized and gotten that. The most impressive to me, though, are these people who are like clinically dead, and then they're saying the names they read of like EMT people at the hospital who took their carcass off the cart, like, and it's
the cart onto the table.
Yeah, and that's impossible. And so there's all these doctors and nurses, especially, who have seen it enough times. Like, there's doctors who have seen like multiple patients die and come back, and then they've said things like, "I saw when you put that suture in," like, and it's just cool because that gives me not faith or hope, it gives me excitement. Like, I would love for this to be super mysterious and weird. I would hate to find out that life is practical and scientific and a big bang.
Exactly.
Like, that would really make me sad. I would love for like some twist ending where like there are space aliens, but they're not God, and they're just trying to help us get a little smarter. You know, I'm just into, so I'm not a wackadoo. I don't wear tinfoil hats, but yeah.
I get that. It's even, I think life would be so much more boring if it was just straight scientific. This is how it works. This is how it does it. But there's so much stuff that we can't explain, or things that are weird, that you know, you got to have a philosophy on something, and whether that be religion, philosophy itself, or just your thought process. There's things out there that science can't explain. And I mean, you and I have seen in our lifetime that over time, yeah, maybe science can explain it, but there's still more that it hasn't explained than it has. And I think that's the interesting part, like you said, where it comes in, that we don't know what's going to happen, you know, having these near-death experiences. And myself being a, you know, former police officer, and I was an EMT for 4 years, I've seen it. I've seen people where, you know, we put them on a monitor and they're flatlined, and they, you know, in the movies they say, oh, flatline shock them. No, when you're flatlined, you're done. There's no rhythm in your heart. There's no nothing. So we don't even shock you if you're flatlined. This person came back. So was it a faulty equipment, or I don't know what it was, but they were flatlined. We were going to shock them. We're on the way to the hospital, calling them saying, hey, he's flatlined. Then all of a sudden, boom, we got a beat. You know,
I'm going to make
just
you
out of
repeat
nowhere
that on the podcast.
So
For
yeah,
sure, because that is
but
so
it's crazy
cool.
how these things happen, because they teach us, you know, when I went through EMT Academy, you know, they teach you, they teach you no, you got to have some type of a rhythm that's shockable in order to get them back. Because usually when it's shockable, it means the heart's like quivering or beating in an irregular pattern. So what you do is you shock it with a little bit of electricity to try to get it back on a normal pattern. But when it's flat, it's dead. That's what they say. You know, but in this case, I saw someone right on the squad where we're like, you know, I'm driving, they're what we think dead on the gurney, and you know, we're driving. Yeah, he's flatlined. We've got no pulse. Well, and then all of a sudden, I hear in the back as I'm driving, he goes, "What the hell?" And he's like, he just got a heartbeat back from nowhere, you know, and he was unconscious, not breathing, nothing, and then just started, you know, spontaneously breathing on his own. We gave no CPR, no nothing. It was crazy.
So you just reminded me of something like really important too in this whole discussion, which is I'm going to give 3 quick examples, because that way I think our audience will like best understand what I'm trying to point out. One, the best NDE book I ever read, near-death experience book, was by a surgeon who risked his career to publish the book. And what I mean by that is, by coming out and saying this happened, he was going to be destroyed by the board, because there's just a conglomerate of professionals who do not want any holes in science. This is actually related to COVID, but I'm not even going to go there. But I'm just going to say that there is even if you're super into vaccines and stuff, there is this weird thing in science where they really want to be dominant and to like be right. But the scientific method is actually about inquiry. No such thing as germs. Now there's germs. Oh, wait, molecules aren't the smallest thing. Atoms aren't the smallest thing. So science is like constantly disproving and then reproving itself.
Exactly.
So near-death experiences and that flatline approach is exactly what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to also say the following. One of the reasons that the only people you hear of who like visit by aliens or see UFOs, a lot of times they're very uneducated and they're like not credible people. The second reason for that is that credible people know better than to come out and talk about something that would discredit them. And the reason I can relate this is I came from California and I used to smoke pot, but because it was illegal, I would not tell anyone I smoked pot.
Absolutely.
So I was doing a discredit to intelligent people who have their S together, show up to work on time, don't get high at work, can be in a relationship, it's an irony. Like, so if you're good at doing something that's illegal, you have to hide it. And if you're seeing things that aren't adapted by the mainstream, it's in your best interest to lie about it. So this is a huge issue to me.
And you know what? And that comes back to the beginning of our conversation when I say I tend to lean to the right, and you said it sounded a little fearful to say that. And it's because that mainstream wants to tell me that if you lean to the right, you're bad. Because you're not going with the big mainstream overall narrative. And you're absolutely right. None of us should have that idea that if you say something that it's wrong or bad or, immoral, unless it truly is immoral. If you're talking about killing people all the time, then I'm going to call you out. But yeah, if it's something that you do that, and just go to the marijuana thing, if it right now, I think it's legal in California. They legalized it in Ohio this last year and Nothing's happened here in Ohio. They haven't, there hasn't been more DUIs because of marijuana. And if anything, people are probably calmer. Even when I was a cop, I'll be 100% honest. And a lot of my cop buddies don't agree with this, but I said, I've never had to fight anybody that was high on marijuana, but I've had to fight people that were high on crack, alcohol, cocaine, because it's different. But marijuana is a totally different thing. And that, I used to irk me when you get a kid with a little roach and you're like, crap, we got cameras everywhere. So it's like, I got to do something, but it would cost me more in paperwork and that kid would be back home, probably smoking a joint while I'm still at the station filling out paperwork, for something that truly, and we're seeing now, has great medicinal purposes too. They're still not allowing that out to the public. But anyway, sorry, I got off topic there again.
No, I appreciate it. I think that's really the approach we need, is people like you being honest, your colleagues being honest too, by the way. I keep wanting to support both sides. Like, it's not, it's just open dialogue. That's what you and I are really, and I click with you. I really do.
Yeah. And I do too, because even looking at it from my, I've been out of law enforcement for a few years now, and just looking back at some of the things, I'm like, maybe I would have done that differently, or, definitely we were trained differently than they are now. And maybe if we would have saw from a policing aspect, the way that the communities were changing and changed with them, we wouldn't have as many problems as we do now. But, there's been a lot of things to change too. A lot of people want to blame the police for not doing their job and arresting criminals or whatever. But on the other hand, they do arrest somebody and then prosecutors let them out. So I think you guys saw that. I don't know if it was in your area, but in Los Angeles, where it was if it had to be under $1,000 or over $1,000 for them to prosecute someone for a theft.
I never.
Like
I'm sorry. I live in Phoenix now. I should have mentioned
that. You live in Phoenix now? Okay.
Yeah. But no, I did see that.
Did you see that? Yeah.
No, I follow. I'm gonna get in so much trouble on this podcast if friends of mine watch it, because I love California and I'm from there, but I left and moved for a reason, and I'm not going back. And one of those reasons, even though it happened after I left, is exactly what you just cited, which is the ludicrous idea of saying under 1,000, no big deal. I mean, like, every Walgreens is closing. The biggest mall downtown San Francisco is going to shutter its doors. It's a sad.
Exactly.
But by the way, it's probably good to see what happens when you go that hard, because it's also scary to see what happened in the 80s and what's going to happen again when we go this hard. Like, by the way, everyone watching, there's a reason he said I lean, and there's a reason I said I lean.
Exactly.
When you full go.
And, and I think that's the thing, is that everybody wants to say I'm either a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm an independent. I like to say, I'm not an independent. I lean towards the right because that's my upbringing and that's my thought process. I had a career that was extremely towards that way, but I like to believe that I have independent thought, because I'm going to vote for the person who's going to best support what I believe in and what I feel is going to move the country in the right direction. So, for example, when Barack Obama ran the first time, I voted for Barack Obama. Now, some things happened during that time. I actually lost my job as a cop in 2009. I did not vote for him the second time. But, it was a little bit different. But just to show that I thought he had a great message that he could deliver and bring a great America or United States that we probably hadn't seen before. But then after the first 4 years, I just didn't see it. And, I used to always joke and say, well, he took my hope, which was, money, and turned it into change, because that's what a dollar bill. But, but I wanted to give him a chance, and I love to give anybody a chance too. And that's where I say, while I lean to the right, I don't always vote on the right. I don't always vote on the left. I vote what appeals to me. And I think that that's what most people should do, and not just pick one specific party, because I don't think either of the parties represent all of us.
Yeah. And I think, I know enough people don't vote that it's impossible to say what Americans do, but you can talk about what voters do. So I think that's important whenever, because I used to teach ESL, so I'm familiar with the mindset of foreigners almost as much as Americans. Yeah. And one of the biggest things that they don't understand is they look at our results of elections and they're like, well, 50% of Americans like Trump. And no, 50% of Americans stayed at home and said double middle finger to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Exactly.
You guys pick one of these poisons and I'll just deal with it.
Well, and that's, not to stay on politics, but that's, I think, one of our biggest problems we've had over the past, 16, 20 years, whatever, is our choices. When they put these people up to the highest office in the land, as we say, which in reality, Congress is the highest office because they have the most power. But anyway, we put these people up for election as a president, and the people they pick, you're just like, this is it. This is the best of the best. Then something's wrong here.
That's my problem.
I could see how people don't want to do it, because they're like, this is my choice. I got Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and I don't like either of them. Well, I'm just not going to vote, but then you have the other end of it. Well, when you don't vote, then, you have no say in what's happening, as far as the vote that cast the person in there. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely different than, I don't want to say growing up, Bill Clinton. I remember him balancing the budget when he was in office. And I remember working I started working in the Bill Clinton era, and I was like,
me too.
He's awesome. I never worked for minimum wage as a kid. And I think that has to do with Bill Clinton's administration and probably Congress and Senate that was in at that time, because they all had to work together to get that budget balance. But that's what I would like to see more of, where people are living good. If, I was a kid in high school, making more than minimum wage, which is almost unheard of. I was making almost at that time, we're talking 25 years ago now, 25, 30 years ago, making $8-9 an hour, which minimum wage was $4.25.
Hey, kiddos out there, that was a genuine eyes go wide, because I'm from his era, and I'm telling you, like, I got in 2003, my first job out of college was a barista, $5.25 an hour plus tips, and that was good. The $5.25 an hour.
That actually wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
I used to
base
work
wage for
my first real job that wasn't in fast food or anything was I worked for Sears when they were around in their power tool, and I made $3.25 an hour, but they also paid us commission on anything we sold.
Wow.
So I had a paycheck as what was I at the time, 17 years old. I had an $1,800 paycheck for 20 hours, and that was because of commissions. Well, they found out, hey, we don't have to pay commission, and they changed the wage structure. But, there's little kids, kids like me that were selling power tools because I learned a lot about them, sold them to the right people, learned not to discriminate. I used to love, this is a story I like to tell. When I worked at Sears, we would have people come in that would just be, holy jeans, dirt all over them and stuff. And a lot of the people were like, they probably don't have any money. They're dirty, they're grimy. And my thought process was, or my philosophy, right, getting back to this was, well, they're probably dirty and grimy because they're out there working. And they're probably in here because they need tools to do that job. So I would people would ignore them, and I'd go up and say, hey, how can I help you? Well, I'm looking for this, and I want to get this big tool set. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure. And I'm like, see what happens, and then they pay cash, because that's a lot of people that are contractors and stuff. They back then used to deal a lot in cash. So they'd come and pay cash for big tool sets and stuff. And I mean, I'd end up making a ton of commission, but people wouldn't want to help them because they look different or they look dirty. Oh, they don't have any money. And it's like, no, it's quite the opposite.
And you said something in that story too that is so key to like what I see as like politics is such a distraction from this one element of that story, which is this corporation discovered you don't have to give commission, and then they changed it. And that's the biggest change in our lifetime is corporations discovering I don't have to do this, and no rising up of the people and no protection from Congress or the president.
Absolutely.
Because all of them work for the corporations now. And that wasn't true when you were a kid. Like Bill Clinton definitely was a corporate sleazebaggy guy, but he still understood that his bread and butter was like the middle class. And so that's to me.
Yes, he still understood what his constituents wanted.
Yeah.
And so he knew how to appease them. Whether it's what he wanted to do, he knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, I think, now where we see a lot with, you saw it with Joe Biden, you see it with Trump, is that they're very, my people forget the other people. And I think we need someone, it'd be nice to find someone that says, no, I'm going to be the president of all the people. And, give everybody a voice, hear everybody out, maybe make some concessions. But now it's just like, no, it's either this way or that way. I forget it.
Yeah.
But you're right.
No, it's
because with the companies, you're absolutely right. They said, oh, well, we don't have to give commission, so we won't. And then think about health insurance. How health insurance keeps going up. Well, we'll just pass that price on to our employees. They're fortunate that I provide health insurance for them. And I'm not saying all companies are like that, because my wife actually works for a company that gives them free health care, and they have no choice. They have to take it, and I'm like, well, that's a good company that wants to have healthy people. And I mean, it's not the best, but when you look at it and say, okay, it's better than mine. It's better than one I have to pay for, and she doesn't have to pay for. But you're right. Companies find out, and then the more with less, oh, you know what? We'll just keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them and make them do more and more and more. But we're not going to give them any more money, even though they're doing the work of 3 or 4 people.
Yeah. And I'm not a socialist by any means, but it's odd to me that we do agree to pay with public funds police officers and fire departments, and then we agree to a certain extent schools. But it just seems like health should be like the fourth thing we like. It
right.
You shouldn't call the fire department and they go, I don't know, do you have a job?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's it's just like,
I'm going to need to see your taxpayer card to make sure you paid taxes for this service, right?
Yeah. So it's just crazy.
You don't
and
do
then
that.
Meanwhile, like poor people just know, like go to the ER, you'll get in quicker anyway.
It was, before I started my law enforcement career, I worked for a children's hospital here. And that was the one thing that I saw was we had a lot of people, of course, being in Akron, we had a lot of people that were on welfare or on Medicaid, and they would just come use the ER as their doctor's office. Their kids running around, allegedly sick, but they're running around in the thing, making a nuance, but they're using that. And then you have people that are really sick that can't get the care because everybody's, flooding it in. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't know how healthcare has gotten to where it has been. I remember when I first started working, we had, if you remember this, HMOs, where you had to go to specific doctors in the network and all that stuff. And I remember thinking back then, man, this is the worst because I got to go to whoever they tell me to. Now I'm like, I pay so much for my premiums, plus it's a high deductible plan. I would rather have the HMO back, At least I know it's paid for.
Yeah. And again, this is all philosophy because like my philosophy's changed. Like when I was young, doctors, who needs that? Like I'll just put a Band-Aid on.
Exactly. Why do I need health insurance in my 20s?
Yeah. But
now we're in our 40s.
Yeah. But I would say the one thing that I feel we could use more of in America for real is just like compassion, like just thinking about your neighbor. And I really like talking to former, current, it doesn't matter, but law enforcement and EMT and those kind of services, because you can't fake it at that point. Like no matter how hard you are or how soft you are, you spend a year on any police force in any city in this country, even like a rural one, it doesn't matter. You're going to see everything, and it'll make you might still be political because that respects what you want to see happen. But yeah, so. No,
it was, it being in law enforcement and even EMT really changes your outlook on life, just on people. One, you start to, especially in law enforcement, you start to develop, like, I don't want to say a dislike, but you don't trust anybody because of all the negative things you see. Nobody calls the cops when they're having a great day. Hey, come over and have a piece of cake at my kid's birthday party. It's never that. It's always truth. Exactly. It's always the opposite of that, where it's usually somebody's worst day. And that takes a toll on you. If you're seeing that day in and day out and people just treating each other like crap. And that's one of the things where I could probably get some flack, but I say, military and police are very similar as far as what they see. I said, the one thing that might make police officers a little bit worse than being in the military is the fact that we're seeing our own people do it to each other.
Yeah.
Whereas in the military seeing it, but they might have, well, who knows? They might see it here because if they're used for the National Guard or something like that, we saw the riots in California from the fire, not riots, looting from the fires, people taking advantage, and they had to call in a National Guard to help. I'm like, really, people? These people's houses are burning down, and you're like, hey, this is a great time for me to steal.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I could keep talking to you for hours. I know we're up against it's very interesting to me that even that is a philosophical thing I cannot get to the bottom of, which is the average person good or bad? Is that even just a fake word? But I do know that the average person I meet and talk to for more than a minute has like a heart and a soul. And I'm saying that with like whatever interpretation people want to put on that. But like something like, or I'll bring it back to hospice, and you've seen people die for sure. You've alluded to it, and I'm just, I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But there is a thing in the eyes of a person who's unconscious but alive that isn't there when they're dead and not alive. And there's a thing in their eyes, and that is the thing to me that isn't your mind or your body. That thing is whatever we call soul. But you've seen it and I've seen it. When it goes out, it really is just a carcass. It's just like a shell, dead animal. It's weird.
It's like a person stepping out of the car after they drove it. The car right there is not doing anything. It's just a vessel for the person inside of it. And that's exactly the same thing. You can see, not to be morbid, but when someone's there versus when they go, you could tell. It's definitely, you could see it.
Yeah.
But so Mike, what else do we want to talk about?
We've
talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We kind of got off topic, but I want to talk a little bit more about you. Do you want to talk about any of your writings or any of your podcast shows that, you want to hit up?
Yeah. I mean, I would just say, the good thing and the bad thing about my personality is I'm kind of like, I spend a lot of time doing something and then I finish it and I move on. So I've written 700 essays probably.
Wow.
And I've published 5 novels. I have 6 albums out, like music. I've made 6 or 7 movies. I'm always thinking and doing things. So my website, mikeyop.com, is really just like all of it. If I were to like, I appreciate your question. It's very hard for my personality to answer that because I kind of like, so like right now, like today's my daughter's first birthday. We're about to have a birthday party for her.
Happy birthday to her.
So on my mind recently has just been like how weird it is to be a dad and with daughters, because I grew up with like a brother. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends, and I'm not like, so having daughters, I'm like seeing like, oh, if I had known how like normal girls are when I was young, I would have treated them normally. Not
like
one
there
way
were
or the
some
other.
different species that we've never seen before. Even though we probably had a mom in our life, right? We know what a girl is. We see mom every day, right?
So that's kind of like my big like topic du jour. Like the thing that's on my brain lately is like a lot of it's not about trans and stuff because we talked about that earlier, but just literally this like weird thing that is the interaction between a father and his daughter and vice versa, and then watching my mom with her daughters like that. There's just something unique and different. And like, I'll never know what it feels like to be a mom, and she'll never know what it feels like to be a dad. But you and I know what it was like to be a son and how weird it is to have a dad. So then when you're a dad, it's just like this weird thing because you see how much power they think you have. And it's so fake. Like,
and they're like,
so weird.
Dad knows everything. He's got it all together. He's the, the bee's knees. And in reality, we're probably sitting here going, I don't know a darn thing. And I'm just kind of winging this and going it's like,
And I can see too how like if you're not like a morally sound person, you can really mess up kids by like forcing them to believe what you believe, telling them like things you're pretty sure of, but saying it like a fact. Like I trip up a lot with that. Like like my last article I wrote was making fun of my daughter asked why can't bears hold swords, and I said because animals don't have opposable thumbs except humans. Primates do, but like she's like, that's not true. Bears can hold swords. And then in my head I started thinking about it. I was like, I shouldn't tell her bears can't hold swords because like I used to say like America would never shut down over a cold, and then COVID happened. Like like I don't know what's gonna happen. Like so that to me is also just to go back to like my biggest drive in life is just to be like confident but not certain. Like that.
And
in that space.
That's a perfect example. Say no, bears can't hold swords, but then on the other hand, like you said, you sat there and thought, well, maybe they can. I don't know. Just because I've never seen one hold a sword doesn't mean they
Yeah.
can't. But yeah, and the funny thing is with kids, and even though I'm not a dad, I love, especially younger kids and their creativity and their questions and their amazement and awe in trying to figure out the universe. And the questions they ask are just so innocent and just so amazing that they actually make you think a lot of times, like that one. Because, right off the bat, I'm sure, Mike, you were like, no, bears can't hold swords. I mean,
Yeah.
why would you think that?
Yeah.
But then you're like, wait a second, did this young child just make me think? Can a bear hold a sword? I don't know. So it's, I think we learn just as much from the kids as we do ourselves and each other,
Yep, we do. And it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm about to go hang out with a 1-year-old, and that's the weirdest phrase I could ever say. Like, how do you hang out with a 1-year-old? May you find out, may you never find out. I don't know.
Exactly. But you know what? You're going to love every minute of it too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's for sure.
I will say this.
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick on parenting, because parents often annoy me even as a parent. I like hanging out with my kids. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. There's some kids that you like to hang out with more than others as well, and your kids are probably always the exception to the rule, but
because they're your kids. I mean, it's like crazy.
Exactly. So, Mike, this has been awesome, actually, and I want to be cognizant of your time because I think, we're already over, and I know you got a birthday party to go to. But what do you got coming up? Anything new that you want the listeners to know about? Any new writings or obviously we got your podcast and your Substacks.
No, I think I just released as of January of 2025. I'm on a new kick now where I'm doing bonus podcast, bonus fiction, and bonus essays. And what I'm actually doing that's new and different is I'm writing first-person nonfiction essays. So, for example, last month's was the story of I went to an all-women's undergraduate school as a graduate student because they needed funding, so they let men in. And I had some really, really weird reverse sexism there. And so I wrote about that. And
that's a topic we could probably talk about together because I actually, working in the hospital system, I managed a call center in my later life as I transitioned out of law enforcement. I worked a couple of jobs before I got into what I'm doing now. But I had the same exact thing. I worked in a call center environment for a bunch of years, which is predominantly female dominant.
For sure.
And I had the same issue, where I felt it the opposite way of I came from two different backgrounds. I come from a call center that was predominantly female. And then I was a cop before that, which was predominantly male. So I saw both ends of the spectrum.
Well, that would explain why you're actually very compassionate and reasonable, because I think those experiences it's eye-opening. Mine was, and I'm sure yours. And that's next month is going to be when I was in college, I was in a fraternity. And one time I'm an idiot. I accidentally invited skinheads to a party that we were throwing.
My goodness.
And, so they came in and, I'm going to write the whole story. So that's the new projects I'm doing is these first-person stories that I would never tell normal people, and so I'm putting them on the site. And then the fiction stories, I'm actually going back and releasing unreleased short stories, because I used to write short stories a lot, and that's what got me into my MFA program. So after years and years of writing only novels, I'm writing short stories, also because while I don't like how much the attention span has gone down, I am finding that people do love reading still, but they would prefer not a
smaller
novel.
chunks.
Just wanna, so I'm okay with short stories. It's a great art, and it's hard to do.
It's still a great way to get your ideas out on paper. And the one thing that I love here, Mike, and I'm going to say this, is that you have a master's in fine arts, right? And you're actually using it.
I know,
which is fantastic. I've met a lot of people that have done, even my wife she has a bachelor's degree in fine arts, and it was in photography specifically, and she doesn't work in anything like that. So
no, I actually I taught writing professionally, and I have copy edited, and I've done other things, and I actually was able to pay off student loans for an MFA with work from an MFA. And I think the only person I've ever met who can say that, and I'm not even bragging. I'm saying that to say how hard this society is. I'm not I'm not even. I'm very lucky.
It's so funny because I took advantage of the same thing when I got my master's degree in IT management. I did that while working in IT. So I got the company to pay for it, and I was like, oh, I should have done this years ago.
That's awesome.
I was like, it's always better when you can get someone else to pay for it, or at least have that, that outlet to help pay for it. But
definitely.
Mike, this has been awesome. Again, like I said, I want to make sure you enjoy your daughter's birthday party. But anything else you want the listeners to know?
No, just head over to mikeapp.com, subscribe for the free letter that comes out. And then if you like my stuff, maybe you'll sign up for the premium. But I'm always happy just to have those free readers, because I just like talking and telling stories and interchanging, and I cannot wait to have you on Coffin
Yes,
Talk. So
I'm looking
I will
forward to
hold
it
you
now.
to it. There's a
Yeah,
recording that's going to
absolutely.
bind you to it. So I will
Yeah,
send you an
you've got
email
it.
shortly.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I
Thank you.
got to tell our listeners, make sure you go out to Mike's website. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. And you also are going to have a guest page on my website, so it'll have your picture, all your information, all your websites on there too. So people can go to justadudepodcast.com and see all your info as well. But I recommend to the readers to the listeners and readers, if you want to read, this is a great place to go to Mike's website because it is fantastic. He's got podcasts on there. He's got some of his stories. You can go in and see his books. It'll take you to Amazon. So make sure you check it out. Mike, it's been great having you on the show. Again, you're welcome back anytime. I think we could have conversations for days and days. Because I know we had an outline for this show and we just blew the heck out of that. So,
I would love to.
But that's the way I love it.
Few people I would love to talk specifically. I don't like talking politics. I like talking politics with you because you have a lot to offer, and I really like the way you spoke today. And if you didn't say where you leaned, I would not be able to describe you politically, and that's the biggest compliment I could give someone.
Nice, yeah.
Because you're just a fair, balanced person.
Same with you, and I hate, I love politics just because it's something that's in our everyday lives, and it really affects us as human beings in this country and human beings around the world, really, with the aid that we give to other countries. But I love talking to folks like you, too, that don't talk about politics in more of a philosophical or into writings, because talking politics is it drains me, because you're just like, it doesn't matter. We could talk all day long, but unless the people in charge do something different, what's it matter? The one thing that matters is that we stick together. We talk as human beings and remember that we're human beings. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which way you voted. As long as you remember that we're all human beings and we have more in common than what separates us, I think, everybody can have a pretty good life there.
Love it. Thanks, Nathan.
Excellent. Well, folks, we've reached the end of another enlightening episode of Just a Dude Podcast. Today, I had the absolute pleasure of diving into the philosophical and the mundane with Mike Oppenheim. He is the creator of You Are Here on Substack. We started peeling back layers of Mike's journey into writing and podcasting and his adventures into schooling and education and his thoughts on death as we talked about his podcast, Coffin Talk. We also talked about how there's shifts in influence in personal narratives and ethics. So if you've enjoyed this deep dive with Mike, I urge you to subscribe to his Substack. You can find all of his information on our website under his guest page for show guests. All his links will be there at justadudepodcast.com. You will find a treasure trove of articles, podcasts, and more, each one inviting you to think a little bit deeper or laugh a little bit harder on Mike's Substack. So thank you, Mike, for sharing your insights and for reminding us that philosophy is everywhere in our decisions, our laughter, and even in our farewells. Before we go, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Just a Dude Podcast if you found value in this conversation. Your support helps us bring more unique voices to your ears. Next time, we're going to have another guest who's sure to challenge your perspective, so stay tuned. Until then, keep questioning, keep laughing, and keep living just a little more thoughtfully. I'm Nathan for Just a Dude Podcast, signing off.